Welcome to Highline Excel 2013 class video number 1. Hey, if you want to download this workbook, click on the link below the video. Hey, this is a class taught at Highline Community College. The name of this class is Business 214 Spreadsheet Construction. It will be Excel 2013 from beginning to end. However, there is a prerequisite. So Business 216 or the Office 2013 or any of the Office classes at YouTube are also the Business 216 class at Highline. So you have to have some computer basics before you can do this series here. Now this will be similar to the book that I wrote and the DVD Slaying Excel Dragons, except for we'll have all the new features for 2013. Now let's go over to the topic sheet. I'm going to click on this sheet right here. Here's the topics. Now there's going to be a bunch of topics, and this will be a long video. So click on the Show More button right below this video to expose the table of contents with time hyperlinks. And then you can jump to any part of this video, or if you watch some of it and you come back later, you can immediately jump to the part you want. All right, we're going to start on the sheet CWSWB. Now, this video is a review. We're going to high-speed review through all of Business 216. Just as a review, you should know everything that we're going to do in this video. All right, so if I click on a cell, hey, look, that's up in the name box, B8, column B, row 8. The cell, the intersecting cell is B8. That's a cell made up of columns and rows. Hey, all the cells are called a worksheet. This is a sheet tab down here. You can click on the sheet. You can click on sheets, sheet tabs, and move between sheets. If you double click a sheet and type and hit enter, that will rename it. I'm going to click escape here. Now, since this is 2013, we're going to see all the new things in 2013, but we'll see it as we go along. Like when we get to charts or pivot tables, you'll see some amazing new features. But look at this. We're going to start right off navigating. There used to be a single arrow, which watch here. It says number 4. If I click this single arrow, it exposes the sheet. So if I click it again, exposes sheet. What happened to the arrow with the line to jump all the way to the end? Well, if you hover your cursor, it gives you a hint. This is kind of like the Google options, where it's just a little round thing, and you're supposed to hover over it to see all the options. So it's telling you have to now use the Control key and then click to jump all the way to the end. So now I can see the last sheet. Now, these arrow navigation keys don't actually move the active sheet. They just jump the view of the sheet. So I'm going to hold my Control and then click and jump to the beginning of the view so I can see all the sheets. Now, a better way to maneuver or navigate through the sheets is Control page down and Control page up. So watch this. Active sheet, Control page down. Oh. So it moves the active sheet. And watch this as I get close to this horizontal scroll bar. Control page down will expose new sheets. So Control page down, and now I'm going to Control page up. All right, so now let's Control page down and stop on keyboards. Now in Business 216, we talked a lot about keyboards. And tell me, what is the reason why keyboards are amongst the #1 most important thing when you're using computers? Yeah, I heard it there. Someone said, because they're fast. Now I'm just going to show you a few here. The one number of keyboards we'll use all the time, but one of the coolest, fastest ones is if I'm in A1 or any cell and I want to jump to the bottom of the column because I want to see how many rows of data are in this little table, Control down arrow. Immediately I can see there's 10,000 rows. Now if I Control down arrow now, because there's nothing, it goes all the way to the bottom. If I were right here to Control right arrow, there's nothing there, so it moves to the 17 point something something billionth cell. Control home goes back to A1. Now I want to highlight this whole column. Control down arrow jumps. Control up arrow jumps to the top of wherever there's some data. But now watch this. If I have a cell selected, before I click with my mouse on that cell, I'm going to hold Shift. Now that's something we did a lot in Business 216. It's very important in Word, in PowerPoint, whatever program you work with. In this case, Excel. That is awesome. click. Before you click on the last one, hold Shift and click again. Boom, it highlights the two bookends and everything in between. Now, we're going to combine Control down arrow and our Shift key to do Control Shift down arrow. In this case, we wanted to highlight the whole column because we want to do some formatting. Now, the keyboard for the Format Cells dialog box right here, you can see this right here. And we'll be doing formatting cells a lot. I'm going to use Control 1. On the Number tab, I'm going to select Currency. Now, I could do that and then click OK. And sure enough, that works. What's the keyboard for Control Z? And I don't have it in the list here. Control Z. We don't ever want to come up here and use this. We want to use, whoa, wait a second, that's cool. Look at that. It shows me in that screen tip what the keyboard is. So for a lot of common things like the sum function, there's a keyboard, Alt equals. So if it's something you do all the time, Control Z, forget using your mouse. It's just not fast. Let's use the keyboard Control Z. So I'm going to Control Z. Now, there's a keyboard for currency number format, and you can see it right here. Control Shift 4. And later in this class, we'll talk about there's a bunch of Control Shift 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. A bunch of those keys do certain types of number formatting. All right, now I'm going to click in the cell. Now, notice my cursor is, or my active cell is white, and the rest of the highlighted region is gray. If I Control down arrow, it will jump to the bottom. And now I'm going to single arrow down to highlight cell F13. Keyboard for AutoSum, Alt equals. Now I'm going to Control Enter. We did that a lot in Business 216. You use that in Excel when your goal is to put the thing in the cell, which was the sum function, and keep the cell selected. Now what did I want to do? I wanted to do Control 1. And here I want to go to Font. And I want to go to Double Accounting Underline. And then click OK. So double accounting underline. And there we have a double accounting underline. Now one last keyboard. I'm going to select D2. And my goal is to add all the numbers from this column. I'm going to use the keyboard Alt equals. Now notice the dancing ants are dancing around. Now, whenever you put a formula in and you have a cell reference, this is a range of cells. Those dancing ants mean you're in redirect mode. So notice I can redirect with my mouse. I could use my arrow keys. I'm going to click Escape and do this again. Alt equals. It guesses wrong, so I'm going to left arrow, right arrow, just to get it in the right place. And now I use the keyboard, Control Shift down arrow. Now if I enter this formula with Enter, notice it obeyed me. It put the thing in the cell and pushed the cursor selected cell down. Let's try that again. Alt equals, left, right, Control Shift down arrow. I could use Control Enter. That puts the thing in the cell and keeps the cell selected, but that's terrible because I really want to be up at the top. I'm going to Control Home. I'm going to try this one more time. Alt equals, left arrow, right arrow, Control Shift down arrow to highlight. Instead of using Enter, I'm going to use, or Control Enter, I'm going to use Shift Enter. Shift Enter is great in this situation because it puts the thing in the cell and pushes your cursor up. Actually, all the choices are Enter, which selects the cell below. Control Enter keeps the cell selected. Tab ends up going to the right. Shift Enter, that goes up. And finally, the last one, which you don't use very often, but Shift Tab. So those are all the ways to put something in a cell. Enter, Tab, Shift Enter, and Control Enter. All right, now let's go to our next sheet, number formatting. I'm going to Control Page Down, Page Down. Number formatting. As important a topic in Excel as any other. But number formatting, you can't do anything. You can't do formulas or even pivot tables or charts. There's all sorts of things that we do in Excel, but it all depends on the data in the cell. And if there's numbers, number formatting. So what's going on here? I know what 25 plus 50 plus 10 plus 15 is. But both of these give me two different answers. There's a sum function, tab, tab, F2. They're both sum functions. Well, wait a second. I didn't think Excel could make errors. Not an error. As soon as you see this situation, your first suspect should be number formatting. So if I highlight all this, I'm going to use the eraser for number formatting. It is, and we talked about this in 216, general. If you apply general number format, it wipes away all the number formatting. And there we can see all that was happening is number formatting was hiding the decimals. It wasn't rounding them. It was displaying something on the top of the spreadsheet. Watch this. Boop. I click decrease decimal. Those unrounded numbers are still there. You can look up in the formula bar. It just displays it differently. If I click there, well, that's 49.5. This formula does not look at number formatting. It looks at the underlying number. Number formatting is a facade. It's just what's on top. What's underneath can be completely different than what's on top. It's like a Halloween mask, right? You're a totally awesome, sweet, nice person. But on top, you have a Dracula or a witch mask. Something on top is different than what's underneath. All right, another important, and we did a lot of this in Business 216, dates are entered, have a number formatting, a date number formatting applied. Hey, we're going to learn an important keyboard. Control semicolon is the keyboard for today's date. So I'm shooting this on 9/20/2013. Enter. Now I'm going to do it again. Control semicolon. I love that. If you're entering transactional dates into the spreadsheet, that saves a lot of time. Now, let's do what we just learned. I put this date, which is a serial number, into the cell. I'm going to look up to the formula bar, but wait a second. They show me the same thing. I'm going to select that cell and go up to General. It'll wipe away. It doesn't care what the number formatting is. It'll wipe away that number formatting and show you what's actually in the cell. That's the number of days since December 31st, 1899. Now, if I scroll down here, you could see these are dates entered. I can see up in the formula bar, but here's the 3 dates. Here are the dates when I wiped away the number formatting. The reason that they program dates to work this way is so we can do date math. So here, this is invoicing. We take the bigger number minus the earlier number, or the later date minus the earlier date, equals, and I'm not going to use my mouse to get the cells here. Escape. I'm going to use my arrow keys. If the cell references are close to where you're building your formula, I'm using the arrow keys. Up arrow minus up arrow, up arrow. Control Enter. That is awesome. Why did that work? The apply general number format. The keyboard for, that's not it. I thought I put it here. Oh, there it is right there. Control Shift, either tilde or grave accent. In an American keyboard, it is up in the upper left corner, right to the left of the number 1 key. So exclamation point 1, that key, right directly to the left of that is this keyboard here. This tilde grave accent, that will give us Control Shift tilde. Wipes away general. Now let me Control Z to undo. Notice if I highlight these 2 cells, the number group drop down there is polite. It's telling me, hey, there's a date number format. But if I Control Shift tilde, notice it's polite here too. It says I just applied the general number format. That's how come date math works. Control Z. Don't forget, if you have a project and you want to include the start date, the way subtraction works is it takes the bigger number and subtracts the smaller number. So that date, the 21st, is not included. So if you have to include that in some date calculations, you have to add 1. Now time, keyboard for the current time. Instead of Control semicolon, that will give me the current today's date. Control Shift semicolon gives me the time. Now you could put these together in a cell. Sometimes you need a date time. So Control semicolon space Control Shift semicolon. That'll give me the date and the time. Wow, 1 minute has gone by. Time, what is time? Time is the proportion of one 24-hour day. We talked about this a lot in Business 216. Here are times. Y is 8.333333, because Excel, the people who designed spreadsheets, they wanted to express time as the proportion of one 24-hour day. So 8 o'clock is like going, hey, total 8 hours as an integer, but we're going to compare it to all the hours in a day. So 8 divided by 24 is 0.333. How about this one? Oh, equals 12 divided by 24. That'll give me 0.5. These are the serial numbers underneath times. That means when we get to doing time calculations, we have to get tricky. Now, I'm going to take the later time minus the earlier time, Control-Enter. Now, what it did there is if I F2, when we have cell references in formulas, it goes and sucks the number formatting. So it applied it to the cell, but I don't want to see it. I want to see the actual number under there. I'm going to go apply General up here or Control-Shift-tilde. So it's working off of the serial number, decimal numbers, the numbers under there that are the proportion of one 24-hour day. Now, Control-Z, oftentimes people will make the mistake. They're like, oh, yeah, 3.5 hours. So they come over here and they say, I'm going to do Control-Shift-4 to apply currency. That's the wage per hour. I'm doing payroll equals wage per hour times the number of hours. So it should be 25 times 3.5. That person would not be too happy. I'm going to Control-Shift-4 to apply currency formatting. That would be terrible. I don't want to make $3.65 for working 3.5 hours. I'm going to come over here and Control-Shift-tilde. Remember, I'm seeing, oh, there's a custom number format on that. That means there must be a custom number format there on these cells when it sucked it here. We'll talk about custom number format later. But I'm going to apply General, Control-Shift-tilde. You can see the General up there. F2 to put this in edit mode. Well, Escape. If by default, Excel takes the 8 hours and divides it by 24. We went from an integer to a decimal, the proportion of one 24-hour day. To get back up, you simply take that decimal and multiply. Up here, we divided by 24. Here, we multiply by 24. And boom, there's our 3.5. There's our 25 bucks. And there's the proper amount for gross. All this is number formatting. One last reminder of what we did in Business 216. If I type for a percentage, if I type 0.03, so 0.03, hey, that is the decimal that results from doing division. 3. So if it's a tax rate, 3 pennies, whoops, equals 3 pennies divided by 100. They said for every $100 of revenue that comes in, you're going to pay 3 of those as a sales tax. So we got this decimal here. Percentage oftentimes is preferred when dealing with decimals like this. So we can simply apply a percentage number format. So I'm going to come up to the drop down. I try to stay away from this button here, and I'll show you why in just a moment. I'm going to come to the drop down and percentage. Notice it gives me a preview there. That's pretty nice. That's what I want. Here is the big mistake many people around the world make every day in Excel. They want 3%. Type a 3, come up and apply your number formatting. Notice we already see the preview, 300%. Well, what happened? The number formatting did exactly what you're supposed to. It slid the decimal 2 places and added a percentage symbol. So if you're going to start with a number, start with the decimal. Now, if you pre-format, you don't run into that problem. Here we did number first, then number format. Let's highlight these 2 cells and do number formatting first. Now, it doesn't show you a preview because nothing's in the cell, but when you use this drop-down, it's always going to show 2 decimals. Now, watch this. If I type a 3, it's totally polite. It pops up with a percentage symbol. It's saying, hey, this cell's already pre-formatted. So when I hit Enter, no problem. But watch this. If I type a decimal, it's not polite. It doesn't pop up. It's not giving you any indication that this is pre-formatted. Now, I'm going to click Escape. You can look up here, of course. But watch this, 0.03. When I hit Enter, both work. So I could type the 3 or the 0.03 when I have it pre-formatted. Now, here's the problem with the button up here that we'll talk about just right now. If you type 0.025, that means like 2.5%. There's a tax of 2.5%. Now, if I come up here and click this button, what happens if you don't understand that number formatting is a facade that sits on top and can be different than the underlying number, then you might get fooled. You might think, oh, well, this is 3%. Well, if it was 3%, remember, the formulas don't look at the number formatting. They look at the number underneath. If it was 3%, when we created this, it would show me $3. It's calculating off the number underneath. Well, what happened here is that button is just programmed, and I wish they would say up here, see the screen tip, I wish they'd say percentage style number formatting with 0 decimals. So we can increase the decimals a few different ways. I'm just going to click, whoops, that's decrease. I'm going to increase. So that's one to watch out for. It's fine to use. It just doesn't show any decimals. And finally, whoops, I did this backwards. I'm going to do a little trick here. I'm going to point to the edge, because this example goes with this text right here. I'm going to point to the edge, and I'm going to hold Shift and click with this cursor. This is the move cursor, and drag down. What it's doing is it's inserting and moving up. I'm going to let go of my mouse, but not my Shift. And there, it actually moved that up. All right, so now I'm going to format as I type. Notice I can look up here, General. If I type 3.25, right now, if I hit Enter, that is a integer 3. There's 3 whole numbers and then a little extra part. But now if I type a percentage symbol, I'm saying format as you type. So although I type what looks like an integer, when I put this percentage symbol, the number that will go into the cell is 0.0325. So there we go. I type that. I put in a number, which is a decimal, and format it as I type. If I come up to the formula bar, I don't see the decimal. Percentages are not going to show you the decimal. They're going to show you that percentage, and I can see this here. How could I prove that actually that decimal did go in the cell? I could apply the general. And sure enough, there we go. I'm going to Control Z because I'm going to leave that there. Now I'm going to go to the next topic using Control Page Down. Types of data. Data, different types of data. We could have words, numbers, trues and false, called logical values or Boolean values, and then errors. So if I type a word like Excel, Enter, well, look at that. By default, it's always aligned to the left. That is useful. That is one visual way to make sure that whatever's in this cell is Excel thinks it's text. Now in this cell, I'm going to type 43, Enter. That is useful. It's a default behavior that tells you Excel thinks that what you just put in the cell is a number because it's aligned to the right. Now, can you trick it? Of course you can with formatting. So this is the default. But certainly someone could come up here and go like that. And there's other ways to get it to do this also. We will run into some of them later. But in general, leave the default because it's useful to know when Excel thinks something is text and when Excel thinks something is a number. I'm going to Control Z. No, Control, if this is Control Z and this is undo the undo, what is that? It's Control Y. So I'm going to Control Y. I'm going to leave that there. Just an example. Maybe even put true, false. If I type TURE, notice that I did type them lowercase. When I hit Enter, logical values will always be capitalized and center. And finally, we can find errors. 1 divided by 0 is a divide by 0 error. And that will also be centered. All right, so that's a little bit about alignment. Let's go from this sheet here forward to a sheet that's hidden under the scroll bar. I'm going to use the keyboard Control Page Down. I'm going to stop on the sheet Align. And now we want to see how knowing our default alignment can help. If you get a column of numbers and they're aligned to the left, you're probably in trouble because numbers stored as text do not work in most formulas. Let's just take a look here. I highlight this. I can see there's text number format, so I know that's trouble. Let's come down here to this cell. I'm selecting A9. I'm going to notice that there's general there. Let's just Alt equals. There's another cue you're in trouble. The sum function and other functions would normally see these numbers and highlight the range inside of the function, but it doesn't. That's a good indication these are text. If I highlight these and force the issue, Control Enter, oh man. Guess what? The sum function is programmed to ignore text. Now, how do we fix this? We could apply general number formatting. But that would mean we'd have to put each individual cell into edit mode and re-enter it. Edit mode, re-enter it. So there's a well-known trick. How do you get a column of numbers stored as text back to numbers? You go to Data, click on Text to Column, and Finish. Now, we will come back and look at all the awesome uses for text to columns later in about week 6 or 7 here. But let's just see. Text to columns, finish, and boom, instantly our numbers are, in essence, re-imported as numbers. Now I can come down here, Control-Shift-4, and I could do whatever other number formatting. Now the sum function, how do you know things like, hey, sum function is programmed to ignore text? Functions, unlike most of Office help, which doesn't work very well, the help for function is pretty awesome. And one quick way to get to the help on a specific function is to click that blue hyperlink. If I click that, if I were to read through this, somewhere down here in remarks it says empty cells, logical values, or text in the array of reference are ignored. All right, how about this one right here? I'm kind of not sure what's going on here. I'm sure if I expanded the column, though, oh, looks like these are dates being treated as text. Remember, dates are serial numbers. How about this? Count. Now, what does count do? Count, count, count blank, count if. We'll see lots of these functions as we go through this class. Now, in 2.16, we talked about this, and you can read right there. If you're confused about what it does, what counter does, read your little screen tips. That says it counts numbers. I'm going to hit Tab and highlight. All right, so it looks like I'm only getting one. So what's causing this? Well, let's put each one of these into edit mode, F2. Ooh, the lead apostrophe. It doesn't matter what you type after a lead apostrophe, it will be treated as text. But if you delete it, oh, there it is. So you can immediately see once Excel sees it as a number, a serial number for a date, it aligns it to the right. F2. Control-Enter. Home. Ooh, the dreaded text. I'd have to apply General, F2. And then Control-Enter. Finally, what about this one? F2. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. Date. But a little investigation shows that we have an extra lead space. One other thing about this alignment. This up here, we prefer doing sum, especially if there's 10,000 numbers, right? One strange aspect of numbers stored as text is if you do any math operation, it will convert them back to numbers. So if I hit F2, those are math operations. The sum function is a function that's programmed, and it's programmed to ignore text. That's a math operation. Plus, minus, divide, multiply, exponent. Those are all math operations. So if you did a formula like this, you could get around it. But you'd never, ever do that. It takes too long to enter. If you insert a row, the formula doesn't update, and on and on. All right, I'm going to go from the align sheet forward using Control Page Down. And we're going to stop on the sheet Data and Info. Now, we've talked about the different types of data and alignment. Now we need to talk about raw data and information. Point number one, you got to have a proper data set. Let's remind ourselves from Business 216. What's a proper data set? Field names in the first row, records in subsequent rows, empty cells all the way around, or row headers or column headers touching the edge of the data set. You cannot have, for example, a note touching the data set. If you're going to have a note or a formula off to the side, it's got to be separated by at least one cell all the way around. Now, you also don't want to have, obviously, blank, completely empty column, because then these fields and this field are not connected. You don't want to have in a totally empty row. You'd want to try to not have empty cells, meaning some of the bits of data are missing. Now, sometimes that just cannot be avoided. It will cause some funny things to happen with pivot tables. We can get around those. We don't always have perfect data sets, but got to have field names at the top, records and rows, in either row headers, column headers, or empty cells all the way around. Now, from raw data into information, that's the definition of data analysis. Anytime you go from raw data and you create useful information to help you make decisions, boom, you've done data analysis. Now let's look at two simple examples. Here we have a sales rep, and we just need to add total for Chun Fei, total for Delia, total for David. Now there's a few ways we could do this. Let's look at a formula method and a pivot table method. We've seen these before in Business 216. Now let's start with a formula. Well, if we're going to add up all the sales for Chun Fei, we definitely need to go through all of these numbers, but we don't want all of them. It's not like we want the sum function to just add them all, just the ones for Chun Fei. So what do? We go through this column. This has all the names. And whenever I see Chun Fei, well, there's one right there. I go and get that number. I remember it, 131. I'm going down, down, down when I see another Chun Fei. There's 113. So those are two numbers, and we keep doing that. Find them all, add them up. Now, what determines the number in this sales column? It's the name, the criteria or condition in the sales rep column. So we're going to come over here. We're going to use the SUMIFs function. Now, there's SUMIF. That only does one condition. But SUMIFs is great because it'll do one or more. Now, the reason I like to use the SUMIFs most of the time is because the screen tip is more polite. If I use SUMIF, it says range, criteria, and sum range. If I use the S version, I can do one condition or more, right? And the screen tip is much more polite. It tells me that's the sum range and that's the criteria range. And notice it puts a 1, so we know that when we put our criteria, that's associated with this criteria range 1. As you put more and more criteria ranges and criteria, you'll see criteria range 2, criteria 2, etc. So let's do our sum range. I'm going to click in the top cell, Control-Shift-Down arrow F4, comma. To get to criteria range, we got to give it the entire sales rep column, Control-Shift-Down arrow F4, and then comma. I'm going to do my left arrow. That's the criteria. Now, wait a second. I hope you remember from Business 216, why did I hit F4 there? And what are those dollar signs? That means it's locked. When we copy this formula down, these will not move relatively. Now, what about this one? This is called, well, someone tell me, remember from Business 216, what type of cell reference is this? Yeah, that's right. I heard it. Relative cell reference. That means as I copy the formula down, that will move. So when I get down here to Jennifer, it's not looking at Chun Fei for criteria. It's looking at Jennifer. All right, so I'm going to close parentheses. You could see the criteria range. So the nice thing about the screen tip is as you add more and more will show up, prompting you to enter them. But here, we are only going to use the first one. We only have one condition or one criteria. Close parentheses, Control-Enter. Remember, we use Control-Enter because we're immediately going to do something to the cell, which is point to the fill handle. When we see our angry rabbit, double-click and send it down. I'm going to jump to the bottom, Control-Down arrow. That is the bottom, and I'm going to immediately hit F2. That puts the cell in edit mode. Boom, look at that. That is beautiful. The dollar signs locked it down, absolute cell reference, and that one right there moved relatively. So as we copied it down, it got a different criteria each time. So we went from raw data, and we summarized it somehow and created useful information. Now, formulas aren't the only way. As we'll see throughout the class, formulas have the advantage over pivot tables in that they instantly update. If we were to come over and this was variable data somehow, watch this. If I change this to a big number like 80,000 or 800,000, instantly a formula updates. Pivot tables don't instantly update, but it's easy enough to refresh the pivot table and get it to update. Nevertheless, that's the big advantage for formulas. I'm going to Control-Z. All right, pivot table. Now remember from Business 216, what did we say? Pivot tables are easy. The big misconception about pivot tables is that they're hard. And the trick is to a pivot table, before we open up the dialog box, is to visualize the end result. So here, this is what we want. Our boss comes in and says, hey, give me a column filled with sales rep names, and then to the right, give me a total for each sales rep. All right, now look at this table. Here's a table. At the head of each row is what? The sales rep name. So these are called row headers, right? And then this is the sales field is the field we want to do some calculation upon, in our case, sum. So with that in mind, we'll open up the Pivot Table dialog box. Now, the Pivot Table dialog box is useless unless you have field names. So when we open it up, it'll give us a list of field names, date, sales rep, and sales. All right, so you ready? You click in a single cell, go to Insert, Pivot Table. Now, we're going to do a lot of pivot tables in this class, so we're going to use keyboards for this. Alt, oh, look at that, I can see the N. N, I can see the V. Now, before I hit V to open up that dialog box, in 2007 and 10, the keyboard was Alt NVT. 2013, they got rid of the T. It's just Alt NV. Totally one key shorter. Now, why did this dialog box guess the right range? Because we have blanks all the way around. All right, new worksheet or existing worksheet. We're going to click and put it on this existing worksheet. We're going to click in location. Now we'll come back to this. I think week 5 or 6 we dive into pivot tables, and we'll see this new amazing data model that's available now in 2013. All right, the location. I'm going to do something dangerous. I'm going to click right here. Now, why is this dangerous? Well, there's data to the left and to the right. If we were to make a pivot table with lots of columns, it would just replace this data here. Now, I know this is going to be a pivot table that goes straight down. We're not going to ruin this, so we're going to accept it. But this is dangerous. Click OK. What pops up? Pivot table field list, date, sales rep, sales. Notice down here, rows, columns. These are row headers, so it means we take our criteria field, sales rep, and drag it down to the row. And watch this. When I drop it, instantly we get a perfect, unique list or distinct list of one of each sales rep. Now, notice over here when I do formulas, I'm literally going to have to type these out or get a list from somewhere else or do a fancy trick with advanced filter, extract unique lists. But notice how easy it was from a pivot table. I just had to know drag and drop. Now we take our sales. Since it's the field that has the items we want to calculate upon, we drag it to values. Now the default is sum. But wait a second. Did you see how fast that was? Look at this. We get the same numbers for each one of the sales rep. Absolutely amazing. Now, with pivot tables, you want to do a little formatting. Also in 2013, different than 10 and 7, the tabs up here for our pivot table tools ribbons are different. And we'll talk about that in great detail later. But we immediately want to go design. Design was in earlier versions also. And we immediately want to go to report layout. That was the same also. And show in tabular. Why do we always want to do this? Because row labels is not a good name. We want the field list, the field name listed there. So I'm going to say show in tabular. And there we have our sales rep field name. Now a couple more things with pivot tables. If you want them to have number formatting, you don't highlight the cells and open up the Format Cells dialog box, because if you ever pivot the table, that formatting will not follow the pivot. So instead, you click in one cell and you open up the one-stop shopping for pivot table calculations, the value field list. Right? Value because we're doing some calculation on it. Field because it's a field. And settings because here's where you change all the settings. Now, we can change a bunch of things here. You can change the name that appears in the pivot table. We'll talk about this later. There's a bunch of calculations there beyond the 11 functions here. And we'll do a lot of that later in week 5 or 6. But here, number formatting. This is what you want to click. Boop. And notice it opens up the format cells, and it looks exactly like the real format cells dialog box, but this will format the actual field in the pivot table. So I'm just going to do currency. So no decimals. Click OK. Click OK. All right. So pivot tables, formulas. We went from raw data, created useful information. That's data analysis. Now, one interesting thing, here's a proper data set. Occasionally, you don't get proper data sets. Oh, look at this. Here's one record, then another record, then another record. You can't do pivot tables or sorting with this. Now, interestingly, in week 10, I think it is, we'll learn how to do recorded macros, which will help us quickly take a bad data set and convert it to a useful, proper data set. All right, now, from data and information sheet, hey, this was proper data. What happens if you have just flat out bad data? That happens. I'm going to use the keyboard Control page down and go to the sheet Bad Data and Formulas. Here we have a little data set, dates, sales reps. Let's do something simple. Let's count with one condition. Count with one condition. Now, notice the sales rep names are here. If this was a full data set with sales for each individual transaction, you could count how many sales Delia had or Devi had by simply counting how many of the names are in the column with the names. Hey, instead of sum ifs for adding, let's use count ifs. Count counts numbers. Counta counts non-empty cells. Count blank does count blank. Count ifs, just like sum if and sum ifs. The count ifs one, the one with the S, is great because it'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, or more conditions or criteria. So I'm going to hit Tab. Criteria range, I'm going to highlight. And I'm copying this formula down, so I hit the F4 key to lock it. Those dollar signs lock it in all directions. That's an absolute cell reference, comma, and our criteria range, left arrow. Now watch this. I'm not going to put that closed parentheses. A lot of times with functions where you're just entering arguments, you can Control Enter. And if you look up here, you can see it puts that parentheses in. All right, so I'm going to copy this down. Huh? Devi had 0. So when this happens, there's 3 basic things that can be causing the problem. The first is, let's go and hit F2. First thing is obviously, is the formula correct? Is it looking at the right range? Does it have the right criteria? Is it the right function? All of those things look pretty good here. So if it's not in the formula, then it's either in the formula inputs, criteria, and raw data. Let's start with the criteria. I'm going to click in the cell and hit F2. Oh, look at that. There's a space at the end. Now, if all of the Devis, for some bizarre, strange reason, had spaces, which is never good, then it would get a count. But here, these have 4 characters, D-E-V-I, no space. This is D-E-V-I space. Doesn't match up in Excel. Watch this. If I backspace to get rid of it, it'll count just fine. So we first check the formula, the formula inputs, the actual cell ranges and references. Then we check our criteria. Now, these two look like they're working right. What about this one? Formula's looking OK. Range, criteria looking OK. F2. OK, that looks OK. Now the trouble begins. If it's the actual raw data, that gets more difficult, especially with large data sets. Now, there's tricks that we'll use. But sometimes, you know, if the data is bad, it can be hard to track it down. Now, in this case, I'm just going to put these cells in edit mode. There's an extra space. Backspace, enter. F2, backspace, enter. F2, backspace, enter. F2. Now, if it was 10,000 rows, we would switch over and do something fancy like use the trim, T-R-I-M function to get rid of spaces. We'll do that later. I think it's when we have a half week where we talk about array formulas. So there are some tricks for dealing with bad data. Sometimes bad data, though, is just flat out hard, and it takes manual labor. Why do we look in that here? Because, again, raw data into useful information. Not all the time do we have criteria or raw data that is particularly useful, and we have to fix it. All right, another example here. You got this spreadsheet from someone else. Now, the convention I use in all of my classes and videos is I always put green in the cell to let me know that this is a formula. Now, in the real world, in a report or your templates you use, you know, that's not a convention that people use. I use it just because it's helpful when we're learning. We could go up this is a spreadsheet you got, and you want to see what's going on in this sheet. You could go to Formulas and over to Show Formulas. Now, there's a keyboard. If you see that screen tip, Control and that little grave accent. I'm going to click Show Formulas. Oh, not only that, let me click this again. This is really useful. Show Formulas will show you actually what's in the cell. So for dates and for formulas, right, when I click this Show Formula, it shows me the serial number, shows me the formula. Now, the keyboard is Control grave accent or tilde on the American keyboard. So it's a toggle. This keyboard is a toggle. So I'm looking at it. It looks OK. Now, I might not pick this up, A14 to A20. Right? So now that I know there's a formula there, maybe I come over here and hit F2 to put it in edit mode. That's why the rangefinder has a color coding, right? It's missing one cell. So when someone highlighted, they didn't highlight enough. So that's another kind of, it's not bad data per se, but our formula wasn't entered correctly. Now, to fix this, you could type a 1 here. You could come down to this edge here and point, and when you see that diagonal two-way black arrow, you can click and drag, and then hit Enter. All right, now we're going to move forward through the sheets, Control Page down, and we'll stop on the sheet Excel Tables. Now we want to talk about the feature in Excel called Excel Tables. Here's our data set we just did a second ago, and here's our formula. The problem with this setup is if I come down here and add a new record, and type Devi, well, the count up here should change to 4. But when I enter that, it doesn't. Now, in 216, we studied databasing. We studied the program Access. In Access, we had tables, and we made what's called a query. Now, a query is just a question of the data set. Here, with our formula, we ask the question, how many Delias are there in this column? So this is a type of query that we're asking, a type of question we're asking of this table here. So it'd be great if in Excel, the same thing would happen. Add new records, formulas update. No problem. I'm going to highlight this in Alt and come up to Home. I almost used the keyboard that I have memorized. And this is great. On the Home ribbon in the Editing group, the Eraser. And notice in 2013, they added a pink eraser. It used to be, I think, white. And there we can clear all. There we can clear just formats. And here, clear contents, that's same as the delete key. So I'm going to say clear all. Now, I know the Alt key on this from earlier versions, Alt EAA. In this version, Alt H, and then we can see an E, and then we can see an A. So it's Alt HEA. All right, so how do we convert this to an Excel table? You just click in a single cell, go up to Insert and Table. Now, what's the keyboard? You can see it right there in the screen tip, Control-T. Ready? Click in a single cell. Empty cells all the way around, Control-T. It's polite. It says, hey, that's the data. I guess right, because we had a proper data set. My table has field name, has headers. It should say field names. I'm going to click OK. Ooh, so it does a bunch of things. It's going to give us what's called a dynamic range. It gives us formatting, and it gives us this great drop down. We'll talk about this later when we do filtering, but there's all sorts of amazing filters, sorting, filtering down here that you can do. I'm going to click Escape. Let's just try it. I'm going to click in cell E3, hit F2. Notice it says what? B2 to B11. I'm going to come down to the bottom. And there's a few ways you can add a new records to the table. You can actually just start typing, which I'll do right now. Tab, and instantly the table has expanded. Obviously, you don't keep data below the table. And watch this. When I hit type Devi and Control-Enter, instantly. Now, let's just admire this. I'm going to click in that cell in F2. Wow, B2 to B11. Change to B2 to B12. The other way, besides just clicking and typing, is anytime you're in the last cell in the last record, when you hit Tab, it adds a new record. 9/16/2013. And I'm going to type David. Control-Enter. Notice I'm doing Control-Enter. If I hit Tab, it would add a new record. Enter would work there too. You just don't want to hit Tab unless you want to add a new record. And just like that, look at that, 13. I mean, that's an amazing feature. Now, in this example, we have used cell references. In essence, our formula was already there, and we can see that the range is expanding. That's called a dynamic range. Now, two things. We can name this table because now it's an official Excel table. And I want to show you what happens when you actually create the formulas after you create the table. So I'm going to click in the cell, and oh, look, there's some context-sensitive a context-sensitive ribbon there, Table Tools. I'm going to go to Design and over here to Table Name. Click. Instead of Table 2, I'm going to call this Sales Table, no spaces. Enter. Now, copy, Control-C, click, Control-V, and I'm going to delete using the delete key. Now, we're going to build this formula again, equals countifs. And the criteria range, now when I highlight the whole column, it gives me the name of the table and the field name in square brackets. Now, if you remember from Access in Business 216, we had field names in square brackets when we made formulas in our queries. So in some ways, this is even nicer than cell references. We had B2 to B13. Now we can see it's from our table, sales table, and it's looking at the field name called sales rep, comma. Now when we click on our criteria, obviously that's going to be a cell reference because it's not part of our table. Close parentheses, Control-Enter, and copy it down. If I click in the last cell, F2, we can see it's working just fine. Now when I come down here, Control semicolon, and this one's going to be Devi. So as soon as I enter this, both of these formulas now should update. Control-Enter, and they do. Now, tables are not just for raw data. You can actually have formulas. So up here, we're going to create a table. Date, product units, price per unit, and then revenue will be a formula here. So the way you do this is you put your field names. So what we're going to do is we're going to format, create one record, convert it to a table. Then every time we add a new record, our formulas and formatting will carry down. So I'm going to highlight the field names and format them somehow. You always want to format your field names in any proper data set, Excel table, with some formatting different than the rest of your raw data. All right, I'm done. I'm going to click Escape. Now I'm going to come here and Control semicolon to put today's date. The product is product 1. Units, I sold 5 of them. Price per unit, this one was 15. Control-Enter, I'm going to add the number formatting, currency, Control-Shift-4. And then tab, our formula will be equals left arrow times left arrow, left arrow. We want our price per unit times our units. There's our formula, Control-Enter. Now, to convert this to a table, have a single cell selected, blanks all the way around, Control-T. Table has headers or field names, click OK. Now watch this. This is amazing. Tab, Control semicolon. I sold product 2. Tab, I sold 10 of them, and product 2 was 25 bucks. Control-Enter. So it carried the formula forward. And look at this, F2. It carried our formula forward. So that's great for either tables that have a mixture of raw data and formulas or just plain raw data. All right, our next topic, style and number formatting. So we've talked about different types of data, how we go from data to useful information. Now we want to talk about taking that useful information and adding format. So I'm going to click on the sheet Style Number Format or use my Control Page Down. All right, so here we have a raw data, proper data set. We've already created our report from raw data into useful information. And there's a formula here, and we'll learn how to do a formula like this, sum ifs with 2 criteria, next week. But now we just want to talk about stylistic formatting and number formatting. And then we'll talk a little bit about style formatting and number formatting in a pivot table. Now the first thing I'd like to do is highlight the whole table and then add borders to all the cells. Now there's a great keyboard to highlight the current table. But I want you to remember, when we created a pivot table just a few minutes ago from a table, remember we used the pivot table dialog box and it guessed the correct data set? Not only that, but when we created our table, Control-T, it somehow knew how to highlight the entire correct table. Guess what? There's a keyboard we can use that accesses that same exact feature that the table and pivot table dialog boxes use. If you do Control asterisk on the number pad, or if you don't want to use the asterisk on the number pad, the asterisk above the number 8, Control-Shift-8, guess what? That does the same thing. It highlights the current region. Just like a pivot table with a proper data set or a table, remember there's empty cells all the way around, so it knows how to highlight the correct range. So now I want to do some stylistic formatting. I'm going to go up to the Home ribbon. Click the Home ribbon. Noticed it was collapsed. So once I click on it, it opens it up. And I'm going to select the All Borders. Now, if the All Borders wasn't the last border that I used, I could click this drop down and select whatever I want. I'm just going to click, and boop, instantly I have All Borders. Now, the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to change the column widths. However, we do have a pivot table down here. And if we change the column widths here, it's going to interfere with this report down here. So first off the bat, I'm actually going to cut and paste this pivot table. Look at this. I'm going to highlight one cell all the way around this. No way. You can cut and paste pivot tables just like you can a set of formulas or raw data. Hey, Control-X is the keyboard for cut. I'm going to scroll over a little bit, scroll up, and I'm going to select P2 and Control-V. There we go. That'll be just fine here. We'll have row heights, and both the row height for this report and this one over here will be the same. All right, now we can change column widths. Now the first thing is I'd like to change so I can see this sales represents the field name for this column of criteria. And if you look up here, boom, that's the boomerang product name. That's the field name or name that we're going to use representing that field name for this criteria here. So I want to make this column wider. You can point between the G and H column headers. And when you see that cursor there, click and drag. I'm going to Control-Z to undo. You can also double click. Now when you double click, that best fits the column. That means it actually looks through all million+ rows and finds the widest thing and fits to that. Now, all of these columns, I'd like the same width here, so I have consistency to my report. So I'm going to point to the H when I see that down pointing arrow. I'm going to click and drag to highlight all the columns. Now, I could double click here, but I'll get some different column widths. And I don't want that in my report. By the way, double clicking all of them and best fitting all of them at the same time, that's a pretty cool trick. But watch this. I'm going to pick the biggest one and maybe click and drag just a little bit. And because I'm moving one of them, all of them are exactly the same size. The next thing I'd like to do is highlight all of the criteria. Each one of these sales rep names is a criteria. And then each one of these product names. Now, how did I do that? Hey, one of the most important things we learned in Business 216 was, of course, click. And before we click on the last one, use Shift. That's our bookends, right? We already talked about that earlier in this video. That's the Shift selection trick. Control allows us to select cells not next to each other. So I highlight the first one. Before I click the second one, I'm now going to hold Control, click and drag. So now I've highlighted two ranges not next to each other. And you can keep going. As long as you hold Control, you can highlight as much as you want. Now I want to show this ribbon. I can either right-click, uncollapse, or use our keyboard Control F1. Remember, Control F1 is a toggle. All right, now from the font group, I'd like to add some fill. It happens that the last color I used was dark blue. If that's not the color I wanted, I could select from amongst these colors. I'm going to click the bucket. That puts fill. I pour the paint into the cells. The letter A means the font color. Again, pick whichever one you want. If the last color used is the one you want, then just click the actual button. Stylistic formatting. So we've changed the column widths. We added some borders, some fill, some font color. You could change the font, the size, all sorts of things. I'm going to select the two field names and come up and add a slightly different color. I'm going to select that one right there and this white. All right, so we did a little stylistic formatting. Now I want to do some number formatting. I'm going to highlight all the numbers. Now wait a second. Look, I used my mouse there. What if this was a gigantic table? I couldn't use Control asterisk right now because I want to do something just to the numbers inside, not the row headers and column headers. So check this out. We could drag all the way down, but here's a keyboard. And for large data sets, this is cool because it'll allow me to select just the inside. Remember, Control-Shift-right arrow would go to the right. But I can extend it while still holding Control-Shift. I then hit down arrow. So again, if I have the top left corner selected, Control-Shift right arrow, down arrow. I love that. Now I'm going to Control-1. Currency, no decimal, so I'm going to decrease to 0. Click OK. So I've done some basic stylistic formatting. Now let's go look at the pivot table. I'm going to use my scroll arrow here. Scroll over. Now, pivot tables, we mentioned earlier, if I highlight all of these cells and did number formatting, the number formatting wouldn't be applied to the field. It would be applied to the cells. So if I ever pivoted this, it wouldn't stick. So for pivot table, I'm going to decrease the zoom here. I could use this, or I can hold Control and use the wheel on my mouse. Then I'm going to hit my up arrow. All right. Now, it looks like before I do any stylistic formatting, I'm going to change the column width here. So I'm going to click and drag. Ooh, formatting a report. What's the number one most important thing in most cases? We do not want row labels, column labels. We want the field names. So go up to our context-sensitive pivot table ribbons. What happened to them? Oh, I see my cursor's outside the pivot table. When I click back inside the pivot table, boom, field list shows up. So do our pivot table ribbon tabs. Now, Analyze, Design. Analyze was called Options in 2007 and 10. Now it's called Analyze. Design was the same, and Design is what we want. We go over to the Layout group, Report Layout, click Show in Tabular. That will give us our field names. Now, column widths. We're going to do the same thing as we did just a moment ago. Click on R and drag over. We'll change all the column widths together. Between V and W, click and drag. Oh, I can see this is hanging over a little bit. Click and drag to accommodate that one. Now, we're going to run into trouble with what we did in just a moment. And I'll show you how to fix it. But our next step is now we want to do our number formatting. Let's go ahead and right-click Value Field Settings. You want to open up the Format Cells dialog box from the Value Field Settings. Number. I'm going to do currency. No decimal places. Click OK. Now, when we click OK, watch what happens. Boom, the column widths are undone. That comes from a default setting in Pivot Table Options. Also, notice that Michael sold no Bellin products, no sales whatsoever. So the cell inside of a pivot table that has a 0 is shown as empty. Well, we can control that. We can control the automatic column widths and what an empty cell shows by going right-click, Pivot Table Options. So on the Layout and Format, Auto Fit Column Widths on Update. I'm going to uncheck that because I'm going to do some more things, and I don't want it to change that. And for Empty Cell Show, we can put a 0. Click OK. And instantly now we have a 0. Now, let's, we got to do this again. Click and drag, and boom, we have our column widths. That is a pretty cool trick there. Now, the drop-down arrows for filtering and sorting, those will not show up when we print it. So our complete field name will show up. That will not be a problem. Let's look at style formatting for a pivot table. Go up to Design. Ooh, Styles. Now we can click any one of these or the More button here. Select whatever we want. There's a good one there. Now, later in week 5, we'll see how it's easy enough to create your own new pivot table style. We'll do that later. There we go. There's our pivot table. Now, we looked at stylistic and number formatting for a pivot table here. I'm going to scroll over. And a report we created with formulas. It's important because a lot of times when you're summarizing, you do use pivot tables. A lot of times in other cases, you use formulas. So there's slightly different methods for how you do stylistic formatting. Now I want to show you something very important. Page setup. We did this in Business 216, but we're going to do it again here. I'm going to expose a few more sheets here. Stylistic number formatting. Now if I Control P, notice it looks like it wants to print everything. Down here, 21 pages. That's not at all what I want. I have this nice little report, and I would like to print it out and not include the raw data and not include the pivot table. No problem. Let's highlight exactly what we want to print out. Go up to Page Layout, Print Area, and Set Print Area. Now let's Control P. Remember in 2000, now I can't remember what version, I think it was 10, they combined the print dialog box and print preview. Very nice. It forces us to look when we're going to print out. So sometimes when there's 21 pages like we have, we don't just print it out. We don't just click the print button. We're forced to look. And here we can see it's got just one. That's looking good. But we need to do some page setup, like horizontal and a footer. Escape. We go up to Page Layout. There's a lot of options here. I like to use this dialog launcher to get to the page setup because everything in one dialog box. Now I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut because this is something I do all the time. Alt. There's a P for Page Layout. P. And then SP. SP. All right, let's do landscape. I'm going to adjust the scale up to about 130. I'm just guessing there. If it's not right, we'll come back and fix it. I'm going to go to margins. I'm going to say, hey, give me horizontal. I could change the top, right, bottom, left, and header and footer. Header and footer here. There's a preview. I don't see anything for the header. There's a preview. I don't see anything for the footer. There's some built-in ones here for the footer, built-in ones for the header, and then there's custom. So I'm going to look at, for the footer, one of the custom ones. Click, and this page 1 of question mark, that means if I were to print 10 pages, it would say 1 of 10, 2 of 10, 3 of 10. Now this is a silly just one-page report, but I'm going to put 1 of 1, just so if people have a bunch of reports from this meeting, right, they drop it on the floor, they know they got just this one. Now that was nice, but I want to add some more. Custom footer. You can type something here like your name. You could come over here and put the date, the time. You could put the file path, the workbook name, and really cool sheet name. Now I'm going to put the sheet name here. We can see down here that's a silly sheet name. But what if this was, report for the period? That would show up. I'm going to click OK. If we come over to sheet, in our next example, we'll see how to use repeat rows and columns. We'll see an example for that. But notice that when we did our print area, it shows up here. There's some other options here we're not going to use. I'm going to click OK. Now when I Control P, there we have a nicely formatted report. Escape. Let's go look at one other example for page setup. I'm going to Control Page down, Page down. If I Control P, now this is a big amortization table, and I want to print it all out. As I go clicking through in my print preview, notice I don't see any field names at the top or any information at the top. This is kind of I'm a little bit confused. I'd like to have the field names at the top. So I'm going to click Escape. I'm going to Alt PSP to open up Page Setup. Now this is a big report. And we definitely want portrait. But one great trick for fit to one-page wide by 1 page tall. If you don't know how many, and you want it to fit to 1 page, but you don't know how many tall, you can highlight the one. Don't put a 0, just delete it. Leaving it blank means however many pages this is, it'll always be 1 page wide, and it'll just know to keep going until it prints them all out because we left it empty. Margins, I'm going to click horizontal. Header and footer. Footer, this is a great example. You definitely want page, or I do, because I want to know in what order they are, page 1 of question mark. Come up to header and type your name. And we could put whatever else, the date, the time, the sheet name, the workbook name, the file path name, but I'm going to click OK. Click OK. Now let's Control P. OK, so that's looking good. Oh, wait a second. That's not looking good. Escape, Alt PSP, and it's the sheet. Rows to repeat at top. I love this. Now we can simply, and we could just select this one, and in fact we will. I'm just going to select the row header 4. It puts in 4, and it will know to always print those out. Now you can try and put the range in, but it's always just going to put the row. These will be printed out on the first page. If I wanted them also printed out on all the pages, then I would highlight all of those rows. But I don't. See 1 to 4. I want just 4. Click OK. And now Control P. I'm clicking forward through my amortization table. Very good. And there's the name at the top. Here's the page 4 of 8 at the bottom. That is looking good. I'm going to click Escape. Now, a few more topics in this video reviewing Business 216. I'm on the sheet page setup. I'm going to use Control Page Down, Page Down. Sort, just to remind you how sort works from Business 216. If we wanted to sort the entire data set alphabetically for product, in fact, let me change the column width here. So the boomerang product. The trick is, just like we saw earlier with the pivot table and Excel table, click in a single cell. Now, since 2007, we can right-click Sort, and it says A to Z or Z to A. We can go up to the data, because this is a simple type of data analysis, and click A to Z. So let's do that, A to Z. And instantly, the entire data set is sorted, not just the particular column you have your cursor in. Notice all the bellens are together. And down here, there's a Carlota. Oh, but what if we want to sort all the sales rep, but within sales rep, we want to show the shift sorted, shift 1, shift 2, shift 3. The way you do that, that means we have 1, 2 fields we want to sort upon. Since we want all of the sales reps together, so all of the Joeys have to be together, then within that we want shift 1, shift 2, shift 3. Since this is the one where we want all the Joeys together, that's the one we do last. All right, so we start on shift, and I'm going to do the right-click, sort, A to Z. Notice that brings all the ones together. Doesn't care at all about the sales rep names. All the ones are together. But once that is sorted perfectly, now when we sort the sales rep either with right-click or A to Z, now we have all the Chun Feis. And you can see, because we sorted this one first, this is sorted. Shift column is sorted within the sales rep. Come down here. When we get to Delia, we can see shift 1, shift 2. So sorting is a pretty amazing basic data analysis feature in Excel on the Data tab. Now we want to talk about filter. I'm going to move forward to the sheet filter using Control Page Down, Page Down. Now, just like sorting, we talked about filter in Business 216. But filter is amazing. We want to see just a couple uses for it. I'm going to click the Filter button, or you can see the keyboard Control-Shift-L. Control-Shift-L. These drop downs are amazing. Let's just say we want the top 10 or the top 3 sales values. We can click on this, and actually that's off the screen, so I'm going to scroll down. Click on the drop down, and for each data type, there's a special filter. Now there's numbers in this column, so number filter comes up. Wow, look at all these. Equals, does not equal, greater than, or equal to, top 10. So I'm going to click on this and change it to top 5. Let's do top 5. And instantly, watch, look at this data set. Right here, we see all the rows, 12, 13, 14, 15. I'm going to click OK and watch what happens. Oh, they turn blue to indicate that some of the rows are hidden. And obviously, we can see there's a lot of rows between 125 and 214. But instantly, I have top 5 values. Now, I'm going to unfilter this. Clear filter. Or actually, the date. Let's look at the date. This is the most amazing one. And this knows that there's a date in this field, so it gives us that special date filter. And look at this. Hey, give me just tomorrow, today, yesterday, next week, this month, last month, next quarter. That is amazing. Now, these new filters came in 2007, and they are just amazing. All right, escape. One of the better uses for filter is this. And let's set this up. And let's compare it to sorting. Our goal here is to extract all of the quad records. So we literally need to go through and find, hey, this is a quad record. If my eyes can even work. There's another one. So we have to go through this huge data set and get all of them and place them into a separate table and email it off or do whatever we're going to do with it. Wow. We could sort. And let's just see what happens when we sort. Single column. We could use this drop down here. It's up at the top, A to Z. But what would happen? Well, all the quads are together down at the bottom. And I'm like, well, maybe I could bring it to the top. I'll sort Z to A. Tri-fly, sunshine, sunset, all these different boomerang products. Oh, there's the quads. Remember, our goal is to copy and paste this. So I could then highlight and drag down, but I don't know how far to go down. The point here is that takes a bunch of clicks and a bunch of time. I'm going to undo Control-Z, Control-Z. Instead, we use filter. Go up here. Uncheck everything, click quad. Now, instantly when I click OK, all of the non-quad records are hidden. And the nice thing about this is I can use my keyboard Control asterisk to highlight the whole table. And watch what happens when I Control-C for copy. The dancing ants go crazy. They're actually highlighting and copying only the visible cells. All of the hidden records are not being copied. Now, you don't want to paste a data set like this to the side because all those rows are hidden. I'm going to Control down arrow and then scroll down and just paste it down here just to show you. Control-V. That is spectacular. So when your goal is to extract just certain records based on a condition or criteria, our condition was, hey, show me only the records with quads. I love filter. I'm going to Control Home. So filter is amazing. Let's unfilter. And how do I turn off the dancing ants? Escape. All right, I'm going to move forward to the next topic. Control page down, Control page down. Oh, pivot table. We've already done 2 pivot tables in this video alone, but let's do another quick one. Your boss comes in and says, hey, I want to see shift all of the products by shift and give me the average. You're like, no problem. I can do that in like 25 seconds. So Alt-NV. I'm going to put it on this sheet, location H1. Click OK. I'm going to drag boomerang product to rows. I'm going to drag shift to columns, sales to values. Don't like those labels there, so I immediately go up to design, report layout tabular, scroll over, right click the values, the one-stop shopping for doing stuff to the calculation. Value field settings, average. We're changing the function. There's 11 functions available, and number formatting. I'm going to select accounting this time. Click OK. Click OK. That is amazing. Now, what is even more amazing about pivot tables is this. That calculation right there, the average amount sold on Shift 3 for the quad product, that is a an average calculation based on two conditions or two criteria. And that's just flat out hard to do with a formula. All right, pivot tables. I'm going to use my arrow here and expose more sheets. We have two more topics in this week 1 review. I'm going to go over to chart types. Click on chart types. Now, why do we have charts in the first place? Well, here we have a summarized table of data. And we have some labels here, toys, boomerangs, kites. And here's the total sales. Now notice the numbers are kind of small. And we can certainly see which one is the biggest, right? This 30,000 here. Kites, that's the biggest one. And the second biggest one is boomerangs at 20,000. But charts. Charts are great because they have an immediate visual impact. Looking at this, I can clearly say which one is the biggest instantly. So charts are great when you want to go from the quantitative number data, lots of little numbers everywhere, to a nice quick visual impact. Now, I just want to go through and remind us what each chart type should be used for. Now, we could highlight the labels and use our Control key and highlight this. And charts are up on Insert. And here's the chart group. Now, this looks different than in earlier versions. And we'll talk especially about that cool one right there. But each one of these different charts, let's take a look at the most common ones. When do we use a pie chart? When you're comparing parts to the whole or you have percentages. What about chart junk? What's chart junk? This is a terrible pie chart. Now, chart junk is what you want to watch out for. Look at this. We have the word boomerang in the legend, and we have it as a label for this particular pie piece. That's unnecessary repetition. Another thing about this, notice how it's tilted on its side. That distorts the proportion in a pie chart. Not good at all. Also, this formatting, it's very busy everywhere. Just not a very good chart. So you want to avoid chart junk. Now, here's a column. This is usually the default chart on most computers. And column charts are great. Here's our legend, toys, boomerangs, kites. And we're comparing these items across categories, January, February, March. So when you have numbers that you want to compare across categories, the column is great. Now we need to compare this column to what in Excel is called a bar. And now it's important to distinguish in Excel column, bar, because in some fields like statistics, they call this column chart a bar chart. So for us in Excel, if we're going to pick the right one up here, remember, columns hold up Greek architecture. A bar is going to be sitting horizontally. Now, what's the difference? Both of these charts compare numbers across categories. We can see January, February, and March. And here we see February, or March, February, January. The difference is when you switch to a bar chart, it compares the differences more forcefully than a column chart. So when you want to emphasize the differences, the bar chart is great. Here, this is called a stacked bar. And look at what we did here. We took 3 individual bars, which it's kind of hard to tell what the total for March is. But here, we can clearly see the total, and we can see within it. So we can clearly see the total is about 33,000, right? So we get the total, and then within it, we can tell from the legend what each individual piece makes up the total. So this is a stack bar. Another set of charts that is important to compare and contrast. This is a line chart. This is an XY scatter. Line charts are similar to columns, except for they do compare across categories, but they're great because they'll show up and down trends across categories. But there's one important distinction we want to make about a line chart. There's only one number. These categories, even if they're years, are equidistance categories. So these are just categories or labels. And then you go up a certain amount, up or down, to decide where the line should be. So there's one number and then some category or label. For an XY scatter, XY, you go along the x-axis a certain amount, meaning a number. and then you go up or down a certain amount, meaning a number. So you go out and then up. In this particular chart, two numbers for XY scatter, one number for line chart. Now we'll go through all of these charts. I think in week 9 is when we're slated to do all sorts of charting. But I do want to look at one example. I'm going to go over to the sheet chart and click on it. I want to show you this great new feature in 2013. But before we do that, what do? When we do a chart, we usually summarize the data first. So here's our raw data. And I created a formula that calculates the total for each shift. Then we could do something simple like, watch this, highlight, go up to, and I'm going to do a simple column chart here. Click in a cell and Control and roll. Now, that is just a quick visual impact. You immediately can see that Shift 3 is the biggest. Now, there are some major changes for charting in 2013, and we will cover those in week 8 or 9, whenever it is in the schedule. In particular, there's no longer 3 ribbon tabs. There's only 2, and we'll talk about these in week 8 or 9. And they moved a lot of the features or the elements that you can add to the chart right to the side of the chart. Things like data labels. There used to be a place up in the ribbons. Now we have to go to this plus symbol. All right, so we'll cover that in week later when we're covering charts. But I want to show you. Notice that in order to get this chart, we had to summarize. The best new feature in 2013 is this. I'm going to click in a single cell, go up to Insert, and Recommended Charts. Watch this when I click it. It's trying to be polite. It's trying to show me that is a terrible chart there. I don't even know what that is. But look at this. Shift 1, sum of sales by shift. What that means, and I'm going to click on this, that little icon means it's creating a pivot table. I'm going to select that and click OK. It'll instantly insert a new sheet. It created the pivot table for us, and it created the chart. All right, I'm going to leave that as sheet 1. We will come back and do lots of fun things with charts later in this class. Our last topic, as a review, I'm going to go to Formula, Basics, and Lookups. Next week, week 2, actually in week 3 and week 4, we'll do lots of things with formulas. But I want to just remind us a few things from Business 216. The most important thing is Excel's golden rule. If formula input data can change, put it in a cell and refer to it with a cell reference. If the data will not change, you can hard code it into your formula. So let's immediately go look at some examples. By the way, here's some notes here. We'll cover these notes next week. We covered most of that in Business 216. Here's our first example. Formula inputs, the golden rule, right? So I need to go from a yearly annual insurance amount to a monthly amount. So how could I do that? We're going to type an equal sign. The equal sign always says, hey, Excel, I'm about to do a formula. And I'm going to arrow up and then divide by 12. Why is one number in a cell and the other number is typed directly into the formula? Because this is a number that can potentially change. It can vary, so we don't type it directly into formula. We use a cell reference. That 12 is months in a year. That's an example of a formula input, in our case a number that's not going to change anytime soon, so you can type it directly into the formula. Click Enter. And why do we do that? Because next year when we use this template and the insurance inevitably goes up to $13,500, boom, our monthly allocation instantly updates. Let's look at our next example. Here we have an amount, and we want to calculate the tax. Our tax rate is 0.125, or 12.5% if we formatted it with percentage number format. I'm going to make a formula equals up arrow times 0.125. That is what you do not want to do. The problem is tax rates change. That's a number that needs to be in the cell. And when I enter this, yes, it calculated the right answer. But when I come back later, first off, I have no idea what the tax rate is. And if I had a spreadsheet filled with lots of cells and I had to go and edit them, it would just be a nightmare. So what you do is you always put the number in a cell and label it. It's not just the act of putting it in the cell, but you need to put a label so when you come back later, you know exactly what all of the inputs are. Here's the amount, and here is the tax rate. Right? When the tax rate inevitably goes up to 14.14 or 14%, this one updates, this one doesn't. Also, when you come back again, the idea is I have a clear label, and I know that that is the assumption I used for this calculation. All right, let's go look at our next example. Scroll down. All right, here's our situation. We have employees and sales. And we need to figure out whether they get a bonus or not. You have to have sales $50,000 or greater. If you do make that hurdle, you get $500. Otherwise, you don't get anything. All right? So here's the deal. We need a formula that we can copy down the column that always looks at the person's sales and compares it to the hurdle. If the sales are greater than or equal to the hurdle, then we need $500 in the cell. If the sales are not greater than or equal to the hurdle, then we need a 0. So for every one of these cells, we need one of two things, either a 0 or 500. In this case, it would be a 0, right? 0 or 500. In this case, it's a 500 because that's greater than or equal to this 50,000. Anytime you have the situation when you have one of two things that need to go into a cell, you can use the if function. So let's try it. We did this exact example in Business 216. If there's 3 arguments, logical test, that logical test comes out to true or false. And then the rest of it's easy. What do you want to put in the cell if it's true? What do you want to put in the cell if it's false? So logical test, we're going to say, are your sales, that's a relative cell reference, are you greater than or equal to? Now, greater than or equal to is a comparative operator, and there's no single comparative operator greater than or equal to. So you have to put a greater than symbol and then an equal sign, 1, 2. That's the same in Access also and some other programs. All right, are your sales relative reference greater than or equal to the hurdle? And now I need to lock this with the F4 key. That logical test only comes out 2 ways, true or false, comma. If it comes out true, what do we want? We want this 500. Lock it with the F4. As we copy down, we always need to be pointing there. Otherwise, and I'm going to type a comma, if it comes out false, 0. Now the 0 isn't going to change, so we're going to put it right into our formula. Close parentheses, Control Enter. Now let's copy it down. I'm going to go to the last one and hit F2. All right, so it looks like it's working. We got our relative cell reference and our 2 absolutes. Now, same situation, but we want the word yes or no, or whatever phrase we might want. Yay, we got the bonus. Oh, no, bonus. We didn't get it. So we'll use the if. Our goal here is to put one of 2, not numbers, but text items into the cell. Logical test will be the same. Relative cell reference, are you greater than or equal to? Locked on our hurdle, F4. Comma, value if true. Well, now we need to put yes, but you can't put text into a formula unless it's in double quotes. All right, so the value of true is going to be yes in double quotes. Comma, value of false, we're going to put no. So if the logical test comes out false, it puts a no. Close parentheses, Control Enter, and now I can double click and send it down because something's to the left of it. And just like that, one of 2 text items. Here we got one of 2 numbers into a cell. I'm going to click in the last cell and hit F2. That's looking good. All right, escape. Let's go down and look at our last formula. We're going to look at 2 examples. We're going to look at the VLOOKUP function. Now here's the situation. We have product 4. And in this cell, we need to always look up the price. So it doesn't matter what we put in this cell, product 4, product 1. We always want the price to automatically be looked up. Now, if you know how to do this manually, then you know how to use the VLOOKUP function. Because what's going to happen in the cell? We need to find the number to put in the cell. Well, we look at this product 1. We put it into our brain. We go racing through the table, the first column of the table. When we find the item we're looking for, we go over to the second column, get the price, $22, and bring it back to the cell. If this is product 4, we look at it. We go racing down the first column of the table. We find the product 4. We jump over, we get the $30, and we bring it back and put it in the cell. Forget it. I don't want to do that manually. I'm going to do equals VL. VL tab. Lookup value. Well, you got to tell the VLOOKUP function what you're looking up. I'm going to click on that, comma. You got to tell the VLOOKUP where the table is. Now, you don't highlight field names. Highlight first column and any subsequent columns. Later in next week or the week after, we'll do lots of lookup situations like tax tables, and those tables have lots of columns. Here we only have 2 columns. The first column will be the item that we're looking up, and the second column has the thing we want to bring back to the cell. Comma, column index. You have to tell VLOOKUP which one of these columns has the thing you want to get and bring back to the cell. Column 2. That orange table has 1, 2 columns. So we got to say, hey, 2. Then comma, the range lookup is the type of lookup you want to do. In our case, we're looking up text, so we're going to use exact match. Approximate match is for commissions and tax rate. We'll look at that example in just a second. Now, the way it works is you can double click this false, which is what we want here, and accept it. Or you can put a 0 instead. So 0 means false. 1 means true. Now, there's some other lookup functions we'll learn in a couple weeks, and they use 1 for approximate match and 0 for exact match. So I tend to use that convention here. I'm using a 0. But by all means, just read the drop-down. That's what it's there for. It's to make it easy to use and say, I'm doing exact match because I want to look up exactly product 4. What it will do with exact match is it will find exactly PRO space 4. All right, I'm putting a 0. Close parentheses, Control Enter. All right, so now if I change this to product 1, boom, it instantly looks it up. But now if I type product 10, ooh, NA. Now, there's a great way we can prevent anyone from putting product 10 in the cell. I'm going to Control Z. And the way we do it is, hey, we already have the table here, and the first column has the only items that we want to allow for a user to put in this cell. So we can use data validation list. I'm going to click in cell C121, data validation. That's going to be under data. Over in data tools, I'm going to select data validation. Data validation. The default is any value. I don't want any value. I want to select from a list. And what's so cool about this is it will add an in-cell drop-down. The source, I simply tell it, this text box with this icon, that's a collapse icon. That means you can connect this text box to the cell. So I'm simply going to highlight that range. Oh, that's so cool. Click OK, and now I have a drop-down. Product 2. So this is a great invoicing example, right? Over here we have a formula that calculates whatever the price is times the quantity. Now, what if we couldn't use data validation list? Let's look at the same example down here. I'm going to do the VLOOKUP formula again. I'm going to say, hey, VLOOKUP. Lookup value is going to be the product name, comma, the table, comma. We're getting the price from the second column, comma, and we're doing exact match, so I'm putting a 0. So that works there, but we can't have data validation, so someone types the wrong product name. Now, the VLOOKUP and other lookup functions are very polite. That means, hey, this product is not available. It's not in our table. But sometimes you want a message that's more polite than NA. No problem. F2. Now, notice VLOOKUP is delivering one of 2 things, either a price from this column or an error message. So when that's the case, we can use the if error. Now, in this case, I typed IF. I'm going to use the down arrow and then tab to get if error. And what's so cool is that value, either a number or an error. I come to the end, and sometimes it's tricky when the formula is hanging out into other cells to click up there. So sometimes it's safer to click up here. I am going to be very careful. As long as you see your I-beam, you know it's OK. If you accidentally see that, then it will start inserting cell references. So I-beam, comma, value if error. I'm going to give it a message in double quotes, not in table. Close parentheses. And now, if error, with the VLOOKUP and some text. So when there's an error, it says not in table. If I give it a product that's in the table, it just flat out looks it up. I mean, the VLOOKUP is not generating an error. All right, we have one other example. Scroll down here. We want to see approximate match. Now, here's our situation. If I say VLOOKUP lookup 5,000, well, it's not going to find 5,000 as an exact match. But we can use approximate match. And here's the thing. If I say 5,000, which one of these categories or which one of these commissions would it be? Well, it's bigger than 2,000, and it's less than the 10,000. So it's got to be that 4%. And we bring that back here, or that 0.04. These just aren't formatted as percentages. All right, so I'm going to type equals VL tab. The lookup value, this amount, comma, the table. Now the table has to have the first column sorted from smallest to biggest. And the reason why is because the method for looking up goes something like this. When VLOOKUP takes the 5,000, it'll race through the first column. And when it bumps into the first number bigger, it knows it's gone too far, and it jumps back one row. That's how it knows which row to select the commission from. Now, that's not exactly how the algorithm for VLOOKUP calculates, but that is the best way to understand how it's working. Comma. The commission rate is in the second column, so I type 2. And then get this, comma, the range lookup. We don't want false, we want approximate. Now, we could put true. We could put a 1. But we want to remember from 216 what we said. Anytime you see square brackets in the screen tip, that means if you know what the default is, you can leave that whole argument out. So they made it the default because approximate match for taxes and commissions is so common. We're just going to assume the default, which is approximate match. So when you're doing approximate match, you just need lookup value, table, and the column index number. And there we go. If I type 14999, what does VLOOKUP approximate match do? It takes this into its brain, 1499. It races through the first column. When it bumps into the first value bigger, it jumps back one row. It knows that's the row. Since we told it 2, second column has the thing I want to return. It takes the 0.065 and brings it back to the cell. All right, that was a lot for week 1, but it was all review of what we did in Business 216. Next week, week 2, we will dive more deeply into formulas. All right, we'll see you next week.